Hi!
My name's Doug Mayer from Run the Alps, and with me is Hillary Gerardi, who is the Director of Sustainability for Run the Alps. I don't even know your full title, is that it?
Actually, it is the... you didn't know that you've awarded me the role of Director of Environmental and Social Responsibility.
There we go. There's her full title.
Yeah.
We're very structured at Run the Alps.
And Run the Alps Rendez-Vous host.
And Run the Alps Rendez-Vous host. We're turning the tables on Hillary today because I get a chance to interview her because of what just happened this past weekend here in Chamonix. Hillary set a new fastest known time from the church in Chamonix, St Michel Church, to the summit of Mont Blanc and back in, and I want you to say it,
7 hours, 25 minutes, and 28 seconds.
freaking amazing. Congratulations. I have
Can
to give
you
you
tell
an
I'm
official
glowing?
on-camera hug. It's so amazing. I want to talk about something we were just talking about off camera, which is confidence. And where confidence comes from. So I hope to hell you have confidence. Lots more confidence after this. But tell me about, were you not confident? Why did you bring that up with me just now?
Like so many athletes, and I'll say specifically female athletes, I do struggle with like imposter syndrome and you know, feeling like, well, do I deserve to be in the position I'm in? Am I, you know, was 2018 my one-hit wonder year that it was a total fluke and all of that? I do think that over the years of being an athlete, I have developed a lot more confidence and a lot better knowledge of who I am. I would say that going into this particular objective, I was absolutely confident in my ability to get from the church to the summit and back to the church. I knew that I could do that I had the skill set, that I had prepared this thing so much that I was confident in that. But what I wasn't confident in, and what took me a really long time to say out loud, was I'm going for the record, and say that publicly, and say I'm gunning for this thing. And that's where I was still lacking some confidence, I think, was in terms of thinking, and I think that in some ways it's like kind of how I go into a lot of races too, that like I know myself and I know what I can do, but I'd say like I'm gonna try to do this, but I'm not necessarily trying to compare myself to other people. So like going for a record means that you're immediately entering into a comparison with somebody else.
You're putting yourself out there to a specific time and saying, I'm trying to beat this time.
Yeah.
Like that takes a certain amount of bravery to put yourself out there.
I didn't have the guts to do that publicly really until the night before. When I published it online. And so that was part of it. And then one thing that we didn't talk about is that you know, building confidence in my own autonomy and ability in the mountains has been a long process. And so I think that, you know, feeling legitimate in that space was also something that I wasn't fully confident in.
That's a good segue to talk about the actual process, because this was not a run to a summit of a mountain. This was a run, mountaineering up, mountaineering down, over technical terrain, over glaciated peaks, crevasses, and then reversing it, a run, you know, down essentially 1,000 meters or so to the church. Can you tell us a bit about how that process played out?
Yeah, so I mean, as you said, like I kind of, you know, split the route into sections, and that's good. That kind of goes to how I approach trail running, even when I'm racing, is like I try to, you know, kind of isolate discrete sections. But for this, there's really like a trail running section that's low down, and then there's an alpinism section that's higher up. And even like in the preparation, the trail running part, I could do a lot on my own, because you can go out, you can run on a trail by yourself. You don't need a lot of gear, you don't need a lot of other people. And then for the upper section, pretty much all of the preparation there, I was with other people, because you don't go just into the alpine by yourself. And you need a whole different set of gear and a whole different skill set. So on race day, what that actually looked like was I had a bag stowed, Charlotte Fluff from Run the Alps stowed
okay.
a bag for me 1,000 meters up the trail that I'd given her the morning before with, you know, my ice axe, my crampons, micro spikes, helmet, puffy, windbreaker, polar fleece, 3 pairs of gloves,
essentially
water,
all the things
the
you
alpine
need
kit.
for a safe alpine experience.
Yeah. So I was able to leave the church then in trail running fashion. So that's what a lot of people see, right? When they see the pictures of the start and the finish. You know, I'm just got a running vest on and ran up to there and did Formula One change where I took off the vest, you know, put on layers, and in this case I did start with my like mountaineering kind of running shoe, Kuhn mountaineering boot, takes a semi-automatic crampon. But so that was so for the uphill, so got all of that alpine gear, and then met Valentine Fabre on the glacier.
Valentine, we need to say, world-class skimo athlete who together the two of you set the women's fastest known time on the haute route ski from Chamonix to Zermatt a few years ago.
Right, yeah, so she's a beast. She's a really great mountain athlete and training to be a mountain guide. So someone I could have full confidence in, you know.
Right.
But so when I got to the start of the glacier, the Glacier des Bossons, we roped up at that point to cross the glacier. And again, you know, that's where you get into the alpine terrain. That's where you need to have a different skill set, and a different set of gear. And so from there, cross the junction, head up towards the North Ridge, take the North Ridge, which is, maybe we'll talk about route later a little bit, but and take that all the way up to the Col du Dôme, join the regular route to the summit, and back down, kind of reversing that with a slight variation of the plateau. And then getting rid of another Formula One swap, getting rid of the gear, and in that case actually taking off the kind of boots and putting on running shoes to finish in trail running style.
And we need to say the prior FKT was held by Emily Forsberg.
Heard of her.
Her, many of those of us who trail run might have heard of her. Quite an amazing trail runner and skyrunner and mountaineer
and
in her own
skimo
right,
athlete.
and skimo athlete. Exactly. At what point did it occur to you, I think maybe I've got this?
From Emily's time, she set the record back in 2018 and did a slightly different variant just from the Grand Mulets hut to the Col du Dôme, which we can talk about in a minute, but I thought I was going to be longer, but the only thing I knew from her time was that she arrived at the summit in 5 hours and 36 minutes.
Okay.
So I didn't have intermediate kind of like times for her. I just knew if I want to beat the record, I need to get to the summit before by 7:30 a.m. Because I left the church at 2. So I had in my head not an idea of splits, but an idea of I need to average about 800 meters an hour. So like, what is that, somewhere around 2,500 feet an hour of ascent for the whole time. And you've got flat sections too, the beginning, the junction, Col du Dôme, and so that's kind of what I had in my head. And it was when I was getting up the summit ridge and got to the top and looked at my watch and said, oh wow, it is only, before 7:15. I was like,
yeah, what was that? As people sometimes joke, what was the second word out of your mouth? That's pretty. I mean, what was your feeling then?
I know that I was just smiling pretty big, and it allowed me also though to then be like, I take the time to have that guy take a picture of me.
Yeah. Some great photos of you on the summit. Can you tell us about the route change and actually one interesting, well, I was going to say backstory, but it's a key part of the story, is the role climate change is playing here in the Alps on the route. So tell us about the route choice and why.
Yeah, well, so the first thing I would say actually is that, even when I ended up doing it this year, was, I would say, definitely impacted by climate change because, as we said, this has been a project that's 3 years in the making, and that's because I've been thinking about it. So the seed was kind of first planted back in 2020. when there weren't races. You want to go back to that later?
No, I want to come back to that later. Yeah, because
but the last 2 years, when I thought, maybe I'd like to try it, I just, I knew by March that we weren't going to have enough snow to fill in the junction enough to be able to get through. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody could do Mont Blanc those years, but it did mean that to move fast and safely through this crux part of the route.
The junction, we need to say, is the meeting point of 2 glaciers, and it's a funky area where there's some little crevasse.
It's pretty tortured.
Yes.
I think a good way to describe it would be tortured or like a labyrinth a lot of the time. And the route is almost never exactly the same year on year, and that's both because glaciers are moving, they're literally flowing, and glaciers that are warming are flowing faster, and so this whole area is changing, and the last 2 years it wasn't possible. This year I thought, January, February, I thought it wasn't going to be possible either because we had massive droughts. I mean, all of France had a huge drought, and I was, about ready to throw in the towel again and be like, another year. And it got me thinking, is it literally ever going to be possible to challenge these records? And then we lucked out in having a really wet, cold spring with a lot of snow, and that allowed things to fill in enough to get really good conditions by this time of year. But so even in terms of what year was I going to do it, that was impacted by climate change. Then another part of it is that we're seeing with mountain routes is that the period of the year, the seasonality is shifting a lot. Kilian's record was in 2013, 10 years ago. It was also an exceptional snow year, but he did it in July. Emily did it on the 21st of June. And I was initially thinking man, well, it might even have to be in May. And in any case, I had to block out almost 2 months to say it could happen somewhere in here. Seasonality is changing a lot with climate change, and so climbing routes, when you can climb them, when you can do them, what the standard season is really different.
And tell us about the route choice, because we had to be frank, we had a tragedy up there this spring, and with the Serac Fall, and part of the route that Emily did is really not particularly safe to go up, but you came down that way. Tell us, can you give us some background there?
So, and it's interesting because when you look at the older IGN maps, the topo maps, you can see that the standard route, even when I bought my topo map for Chamonix 10 years ago, goes in the route that Emily and Kilian took. And so they went up what's called the Petit and the Grand Plateau, which is an area that's really exposed to Serac Fall, and increasingly so. I don't know that there have been studies specifically of that spot, but we know that glaciers are getting less predictable. They're accelerating faster, and we have reason to believe that that this kind of phenomenon is becoming more and more prevalent.
In the Seracs, by the way, just to explain, these are huge. House-sized chunks of ice that are above you that are falling off.
A cliff, essentially.
A cliff. They're essentially underneath the glacier. These huge pieces of ice are falling off. So
that's sort of the older kind of classic route going up, and then there's an alternative from the Grand Muret hut where you can take what's called the North Ridge, which you know well. At this point, which goes, sort of slightly to the right as you're looking at Mont Blanc from the valley, and follows this pretty aesthetic, really sculpted ridge, and then they later on come and join back together up top. And the advantage of that route is that it's not exposed to the Serac Fall. You're not going right underneath it. The disadvantage is that it's steeper and more technical, and can have exposed ice sections on it. So you really need to have alpine gear and a really good grasp on that stuff, on alpine skills. But you're not exposed. So my choice was to take that on the uphill because, believe it or not, I go faster on the downhill than the uphill. So to limit the amount of exposure. On the downhill, it took me 2 hours and 13 minutes to go from the summit down to the church. I can hardly believe that.
Before we started rolling tape, I told Hillary there's certain numbers in trail running that I just don't understand, and that is now one of them.
Yeah.
That is incomprehensibly fast to me.
Would have been faster with skis, but
yeah. But that's fun.
But so that's basically the risk assessment that I did in choosing to descend via that route, because you're really exposed for a minute or two max under the seracs, whereas on the uphill, it could be 10, 15, 20 minutes you're underneath it and in the dark.
Right.
So you couldn't even see
what's happening,
if you heard something falling. So I chose to go that way, and it's my desire that then becomes the new reference route, because
it's safer.
It's a lot safer.
It's safer now, and it's probably only going to get safer comparatively as the climate warms and whatnot. What do you say to people who might be interested in trying, if not this, something like this, like the record on Rainier or trail running and climbing to the summit? You're in this. I mean, I've watched this season as you've tried to find a partner to team up with. Valentine really fit the bill to help you get through the crevasse section, and you're combining disciplines. What do you say to a trail runner who says, I want to try something like that? That looks pretty badass.
I mean, the first thing I would say is it's amazing. It's incredible to be able to do that, and it's incredible what, the fitness that I've gained through trail running has allowed me to do in the high mountains. But what I would say is that the approach that I took actually was that I came in with a lot of alpine climbing baggage, and I've been able to apply an endurance skill set to that. And still, I haven't rested on my laurels this year in prep. I mean, I did days and days of cramponing, days of crevasse rescue skills.
If there's one person who does not rest on his laurels, her laurels, it's you, okay? Everyone in this valley knows that.
Thank you. But so I kind of came at it, more from a mountain background and added trail running afterward.
Yeah.
I think for people who are coming from a trail running background, what's important to know is that it may look in the images like somebody's just, it looks like hiking uphill.
Yeah.
But there's a whole set of baggage that goes along with that.
Yeah.
And so I would say, the first thing is sign yourself up for, intro skills courses, and log miles learning those skills. And another thing is getting the gear. We're so lucky today that we live at a time when there is ultralight mountaineering gears, so you don't have to cut corners for safety. You can have light stuff,
light, good, strong,
and so,
steel crampons that you step right into.
So there's getting the gear, getting the experience, also getting experience with your gear. Because you have to know your stuff inside out. And then being ready to think about what are all the possible contingencies? What do I hope beyond hope will not happen but might happen, and so I need to be ready to plan for that as well. And I think that's those are some of the things that you definitely want to be thinking about, even more so than we usually do on a trail run.
In a mountain environment. I mean, and that's really about resilience, right? That's what if the weather turns bad? What if the conditions aren't what I expected? And I mean, maybe what people don't see when they watch a video or look at photos is all of the training. And I just want to make the point that we've seen that up close here for a couple of years now, scheming about the project, wondering about how it would happen, and then this year, training, running uphill, doing all of your training your coach outlined. You spent a lot of time in the mountains, a lot of time at altitude, acclimatizing. There's a lot behind those photos and whatever films there may be.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty, I would say, at least for the last month, pretty singularly focused on this. But had it something I've been working on for several years. I do want to add sort of one aspect of that preparation too for me has been knowing when to go. And I mentioned that, like, I blocked out, my last race was May 18th, and my next race is July 23rd. I blocked 2 months to wait for the right window, and I think that one of the things that is really important to know is that, so like, what can you control, right? That's your skill set, your gear, your fitness, etc. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff in the mountains that's outside of your control, which has to do with conditions, has to do with weather, has to do with what other people are doing out there as well. And that's really important not to miss that part of it. Because saying, I want to come and do a one-shot, you know, on Mont Blanc, and I'm gonna book that with my flights from the U.S. and I've got 1 week. That doesn't. It could work. It might. But you can't count on that. You have to be willing to say, I'm ready to adapt my goals.
Well, we always say, what's the saying? The mountain is always there. Right? So it's like, it's up to us to be patient and wait for that window.
And to be there when it's ready.
And to be there when it's ready, when conditions. And you had good neve snow for fast cramponing. Everything was in pretty good shape.
Oh, the conditions were excellent. And I can say all week I was on the phone or in person with Yves-Marie Maquet, weather forecaster, who was helping me know, okay, where's the 0 degree isotherm? Where is it refreezing? You know, what can we expect for temperatures? What can we expect for wind? All of this stuff to pick, you know, this is the day. And it turned out that it was the day you were up there.
It was. I had the happy coincidence and pleasure to be climbing with your husband, a guide, and we were near the summit. And I mean, that's a moment I'll remember forever. You going, first of all, we spotted you from quite a distance because everybody else who's on the mountain on that part of the route was moving very slowly, and there's this singular spot going like this. You know, we're like, okay, that's Hillary. And it was just really cool to see you and Brad meet, and we caught you on the way up and then on the way down in a very windy spot. And when you left there, I remember thinking, like, oh my God, she is flying. You were going so fast uphill.
It's funny, I was thinking, don't catch a cramp on, don't catch a cramp on. Like, focus.
Yeah, you were going incredibly fast. I felt so lucky to be able to be at that place at that time and to see that.
Well, I felt very lucky you guys were there. It was a really good morale boost.
It was great. I want to, before we wrap up, I want to go back to sort of the genesis moment. What happened? What gave you this idea?
2020 was obviously a really remarkable year for a lot of reasons. And in the trail running world, all the races were canceled, right? So for me, it was actually a wonderful year because I got to reconnect with the mountains because I wasn't preparing for races. And I think that, you know, a lot of us who are kind of mountain souls appreciated getting that chance. And that year, I actually got to go up Mont Blanc with Mimi. And it probably wasn't the first time, but certainly as she and I were going up there, she brought up, you know, maybe, like, seems like you're pretty good at this. I think you should try to go for the record. And so she was definitely planting the seed, really encouraging me to think about, like, the style, you know, like, you know, can you do it with an all-women's team? Who lives here in the valley that could, you know, be helping you with this? And, you know, really doing it in a true alpine style. And so, I mean, she's a great friend and somebody who not only planted the seed, but then continued to water it.
I think sometimes it takes someone other than ourselves to see what we're capable of. If anyone doesn't know Mimi, in her own right, she's one of the world's best ultra runners. Has won the Chamonix 90K, 30 UTMB, has won races and podium run races all around the world. So she's as credible a source as you could have for someone saying, you know what, you should think about this.
You know, she also got me to do the Mont Blanc 90K, so.
Oh, really?
You know,
okay, all right. So Hillary has won the 90K as well. So
with Mimi and Tony assisting.
With me, yeah. I'm not going to ask you what's next because I imagine you have some well-deserved time coming up of just taking a deep breath, right?
Absolutely, and actually, I will kind of respond to that question because I feel like this has been occupying my brain, my mind, my spirit, my body so fully for like quite a while. And because I told you, I blocked out, I agreed to nothing for, through the end of the month.
Oh yeah, we knew you were focused on this.
And so that means that now that it's done, I have this time where I have like no engagements.
Great.
I don't have to be specifically training. I don't have like meetings or events. I'm just like...
Two last questions.
Okay.
Best moment and second best moment, because I think I know what the best moment was.
Do you think the best moment was arriving at the church or getting a kiss from Brad by the summit?
Oh, I don't know. You want to answer that on camera?
No, I mean, come on, arriving at the church. I mean, Brad's a wonderful human being. We all know that, but... Yeah, I mean, arriving at the church was definitely, I think you can see in the pictures and stuff, there was both like this physical kind of, like I'd given, especially in the last sprint, everything I had. It was about 6.5 minute mile pace at the end.
Wow. All right.
And then just this emotional release when it was like, oh my God. But then seeing you guys on the ridge was a huge boost. There was the moment, anyone who has gotten to spend sunrise from high in the mountains also knows that there's this extraordinarily special feeling of being up there and seeing, the light come into the sky, and that's something that I will never bore of. The very last thing, though, I would say is that there was this unexpected surprise on the way down.
Yes.
Which, when I was coming down past the Grand Mullet hut, I looked up and the entire crew of the hut was out on the roof cheering. And I did not expect it at all. And it was like, ah!
That's pretty cool.
They got my back.
And that comes at a good moment. You're sort of, I don't know, halfway down at that point maybe, something like that. Well, Gerardi, congratulations, man.
Thank you!
Incredible story.
Thanks.
We're super proud of you.
I'm going to be coming down for a long time.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.